almost called out of work the day that Tommy Benner's mom caused a school lockdown. It was a rough week already, and then Mrs. Benner decided to start blasting me on social media for being the worst teacher Tommy has ever had. Since Tommy was in kindergarten, I figured I was both the worst and best teacher he'd ever had, but it was still frustrating to have a parent go off publicly. And it was all because Tommy was struggling with learning letters. So when I heard that Mrs. Benner was waiting at the front office and wanted to talk to me, the news didn't put me in the best mood. I glanced at Tommy, but I didn't blame him for the situation. He was a sweet kid, small for his age, with dark hair and a bone-deep shyness. It wasn't his fault that his mom was a raging Karen. My walkie-talkie clicked to life again with the voice of Anna, the school secretary.
Mr. Harris, did you hear the message? There's a Mrs. Benner at the front office asking to see you.
I sighed, took a deep breath, and forced friendliness into my voice.
Hi, Anna. Yup. Confirming that I heard you, but we are right in the middle of a lesson right now.
I looked over at the kids, who were actually in the middle of having a snack.
Did Mrs. Brenner say what her visit is about? Is this something we could resolve with a phone call later or an email?
There was a long pause. The walkie clicked on again, but at first, I only heard Anna whispering in the background.
Means she's not here. Did you see her? No, I left her right in the...
Hey, Mr. Harris? Sorry about that. It looks like Mrs. Benner isn't in the office anymore.
I felt a warm hum of relief hit my stomach, like honey and tea.
So she left?
I asked. There was a moment of static on the walkie-talkie.
No one saw her leave, Mr. Harris. We don't know where she is.
The relief I felt was gone and replaced with a sinking feeling. I looked around the classroom. All of the kids were distracted with their snacks. My teacher's aide, a college intern named Sam, was sitting in the back of the room helping Jenny tie her shoes. I was getting ready to ask Sam to watch the class while I went up to the office when my walkie-talkie went off again. It was Anna, sounding slightly panicked.
Mr. Harris, place your room on lockdown.
Mrs. Benner seems to have snuck in the security door behind a custodian.
I repeat, place your classroom on lockdown.
There is an unauthorized visitor in the school.
Sam was looking at me, biting her lip. She must have overheard the message. Some of the kids were looking at me as well, but I knew they didn't understand how serious the situation was, except maybe for Tommy Benner. The little boy was staring at me with his sad eyes. He knew his mom was doing something bad. I wondered how bad. What if she was actually dangerous? Normal parents don't sneak past the front office to see a teacher. I put on my best smile and went back to my desk to boot up my laptop. Since I was one of the younger kindergarten teachers, I also liked to help our IT department from time to time. That came with perks, including being able to log into our admin accounts. This meant that I could open up the camera system and see what was going on in the halls. I opened the camera feed and right away found Mrs. Benner. She was trying to be sneaky. I could just see her pressed against the lockers in the east hallway. She gave off classic Karen vibes. Choppy, beach blonde haircut, clothes a size too small, way too much makeup. Her face snapped up towards the camera while I was watching. It was almost like she could sense me. Mrs. Benner looked angry. I wondered if she heard my communication with the front office. Maybe she thought I was blowing her off or avoiding a meeting. I was, but it wasn't meant as an insult. It was because I thought she was a psycho, and here she was, proving me right. The woman bared her teeth, then froze. She might have heard something in the hallway behind her. I hoped it was one of our 2 school resource officers tracking her down. There was no audio with the cameras, so I couldn't tell. Whatever got her attention caused Mrs. Benner to move faster. She was like a wild animal that got out of the zoo, and she was fast for her size. I tried to track her by switching cameras, but only caught glimpses of her roaming the halls. It hit me all at once that I hadn't followed lockdown protocols yet. I leapt up from my desk, then calmed myself, and walked quickly towards the door. The kids were all watching me, and I didn't want to alarm them. I smiled as I locked the door and turned off the lights.
Friends, listen up. Please. We're all going to play a game,
I said. smiling wider but feeling my nerves start to rattle.
Everyone scoot under your desks, and we're going to all be extra quiet. Like hide and seek?
Jenny asked.
Sure, yes,
I said.
Please hurry, okay?
I went back to my desk to check the cameras, ignoring the worried look Sam shot me. As I clicked through video screens of the hallways, I sucked in a breath. Mrs. Benner was in the same hall as our classroom. She was whipping her head back and forth, scouring the nameplates on each door. I realized that Mrs. Benner probably knew she was in the kindergarten hallway, but had no idea where my room was since she'd never been there. While I watched, her eyes snapped to my door and she smiled, showing a lot of teeth. There was a moment where Mrs. Benner went into a camera blind spot. Then there was a knock at my door. The kids were whispering, and Sam had gone pale. I took a deep breath and debated whether I should say anything through the door. I could tell Mrs. Benner that she needed to go back to wait at the office, that what she was doing wasn't allowed. I mean, it was possible she'd made an honest mistake. The woman began pounding on the door, then hitting it hard and low. I realized she was kicking, scrambling to get in like a rabid fox. There was a pause and then a thump, the hardest yet. I saw Mrs. Benner retreat into the hall, then run at the door. A living battering ram. For a terrible second, I feared she might be heavy enough and determined enough to break through. If she got into the classroom as angry as she was, it would be chaos. Mrs. Benner stopped in the middle of the hallway and looked back. A second later, both of our resource officers stepped into view of the camera. There was Greg, an old deputy waiting out the last year before retirement, working at the school. And then there was Billy, a new guy, fresh out of the police academy, getting some light experience before moving on with his career. I doubted either of them thought they'd have to deal with a demented parent and a school lockdown when they got up that morning. Greg raised his hands in a soothing gesture, while Billy plastered a fake smile on his face and walked towards Mrs. Benner. She didn't hesitate to attack the closest target, bowling into Billy hard enough to knock both of them to the floor. The woman turned into a shrieking, biting monster. I saw her clamp her teeth on the young officer's cheek. Billy screamed and pulled away, a strip of flesh ripped from his face. Mrs. Benner sprang to her feet, spitting out the skin and blood. Before she could take another step, Greg let loose with his pepper spray. For an old guy just cruising for retirement, he had fantastic aim. The stream of mace connected directly with the woman's eyes. She roared and moved blindly into the hard tile wall, face first. Greg was on her in an instant, cuffing her with zip ties before moving to Billy to render first aid. The police showed up minutes later, but we had to wait nearly half an hour before the lockdown was lifted and I could open the door. I found out later that Mrs. Benner had a history of violence and prior arrests. Her last outburst was enough to get Child Protective Services to finally intervene and place Tommy in the care of his aunt and uncle. It was a good move for him. I saw his shyness evaporate over the next few months like morning fog cleared away by a summer sun.